Welcome to the Dynasty Deep Dive, where we go beyond the surface and into depths unknown. I am your host, Jeanty. You can find me on X at Fantasy Picasso, where I've been raving about Efton Chisholm, Jalen Coker, all off season long. So let's get straight into it. I've got my boy Andres today, and he is at @nofilm_analysis on X. Love the kind of play on you don't watch film, you're the analytics guy, right? And I'm really excited to have you on the show, man. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Johnny. Like you mentioned, the name is kind of tongue-in-cheek, where I originally started just with the handle I don't watch film, kind of just to emphasize that this is like data-centric analysis, and to kind of give me like a hedge where like, okay, don't be upset at me because this is what the numbers are telling you, this is what the data is telling you. And
I love it.
Yeah,
that's a lot of fun, bro. Like a little bit cheeky, as the Brits would say. So tell me, man, like what got you into advanced analytics and going into the numbers so deep? Like, was there any time that you were like, man, I fell in love with it at this moment? Can you just tell me a little more about what got you into this?
Yeah, it really just became just a natural pairing of things that I've been really passionate about. Obviously, football. I got into football at a pretty young age, kind of independent. I actually grew up with the family of Cowboys fans, but I'm a Giants fan, so victory there. But like a lot of young fans, when I was young, I would just stare at like random statistics for hours on end.
Yeah.
And I would just like go deep dive, not just into current stats, but just like all the way back into the 60s. And then eventually I went to school for like data science, data analytics. And then I've been following like data-centric sports publications, kind of like PFF kind of from the beginning. I really enjoyed how they like spoke about the game. It felt fresh and captivating, and kind of what it helped me understand the game in a way that I was interested about. And then eventually I started doing my own research, and I just realized that there was like a vast amount of space and content with advanced analytics and football, not only in terms of like the content to put out there, but just how people talk about it, how they use it, and just how a lot of casual fans view it. And so,
yeah, I love all
that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and like your work we're going to showcase today, man. So that's kind of the whole point of this show, is like getting people who go put in the like elbow grease and distill meaningful insight for fantasy football managers. And so you put together a bunch of good stuff. There's a ton of content on your X page. So I strongly suggest viewers giving Andres a follow. And like without further ado, let's get into it. Let's talk through some of my favorite things that you've posted about, some of the favorite kind of themes that you've discussed on your page and within some of your content. So I'm going to throw up a graphic that I think is also, just first off, it's awesome. I love the way that you present your content, and just the way that it's all laid out there. And again, just first glance, like we're going to talk about a guy who's been a bit interesting topic of late, right? It's Ashton Jeanty. Like this guy, everything on here, the prospect grade of 9.47, I gotta imagine it's like as good as it gets, right? But you know, he's struggled one game in the preseason and people got a little scared. So like talk to me about just how he compares historically. And I think the real question there for fantasy managers is like with drafts coming up, is he still an easy first round pick in redraft, or are you maybe shying off him with the rookie uncertainty?
Yeah, no, I have no concerns whatsoever about Jeanty. I think he is about as safe of a prospect as you could hope for, especially at the running back position. You mentioned Jeanty, his prospect grade at 9.47. It is high. It does rank high in the predictive model I put together. He comes in second behind Bijan Robinson,
Wow.
who he pretty much had like a perfect 10. But what's interesting about Jeanty is he kind of broke the scale when I was first putting it together and ranked above Bijan. He ranked higher than a 10. Though what kind of held him down or brought his grade down was actually his the level of competition he went against. So like as far as statistics go, he's by far the most statistical dominant running back prospect I've seen in I don't even know how long. You probably had to go back to like the Barry Sanders days where everything is just like an insane level. Like his total yardage gain, but also like the yardage after contact, his explosive attempts, like breakaway attempts, touchdowns. Whether it's advanced metrics or just the basic statistics you look at, he's kind of just like in a tier in his own. And the only thing really bringing him down, which has probably been mentioned a bunch when analyzing him as a prospect, is the level of competition he went against.
Yeah. So you're comfortable taking him within the first like 12 picks in a redraft league?
Yeah, definitely. I probably rank him as in the redraft. I probably rank him around 6 or 7.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're high.
Yeah. The only concern obviously is like a lot of times it's not just about how good the player is, but the situation he's in. I don't think the Raiders' current situation is as bad as it kind of came across with the preseason. I think the blocking is going to be a lot better once the regular season rolls around. And I do have a lot of confidence in their passing game with Geno Smith and their weapons.
Yeah, man. Geno Smith's not a bad quarterback. I don't think the situation's that bad. I think they're going to score points. I think he's a first-round pick in redraft all day. And I think he's one of these guys, like, you can try and go, this is a dynasty show, so I like to always tie it back to, like, how to think about these types of players. Like, obviously you weren't selling him over the past few weeks off some preseason stuff, but, like, I think he's still a guy who, based on how historic he is, to your point, like, if there's any chance to trade for him and do a 2-for-1 package to, send 2 studs to get someone generational like Jeanty, like, with anyone who has a shred of doubt, this is probably the last chance before he kind of sails off into the sunset.
No, I completely agree. I'm someone when it comes to dynasty, I usually like to buy the instant dip players get when they have like a poor performance, whether it's preseason or if you think back to like Jamar Chase and like the training camp where there was a lot of negative press about him. With the drops and anything like that. And during that time, I was like 100% in on him as a prospect. And I remember in Dynasty, it was probably my first Dynasty league, I traded Allen Robinson straight up for Jamar Chase.
Wow.
It's kind of crazy to think back now that we have like looking back with 2020 vision. But at the time, Allen Robinson was pretty hyped up. He was coming off a really good year with the Bears. But yeah, I did not shy away from Chase despite those.
Right. Great. Yeah, great example. Like perfect example of a guy who it's like there's a little uncertainty right now, and then you look back and you like laugh with a guy like Jamar. Yeah. People said that about him. So this guy's not as straightforward. He's not a top 10 NFL pick, but you might be even higher on this guy, and that is Deontay Thornton Jr. You've been beating the drum for him for several months now. You found some interesting data about him. So talk to me a little bit about Deontay Thornton Jr. This is a graphic that I saw you put together, so I wanted to put that on the screen. Obviously, killer speed, intense yards, both air yards and yards after reception were some things that stuck out to you. And so talk to me a little bit more about like what's so interesting to you about this guy.
No, yeah, I am as big of a Dante Thornton fan as you could probably find. I don't think you can find an earlier hype post than the initial post I made back in like very early March. Even at the time, I was kind of unsure because I wasn't aware of his name when I was doing my own research and analysis. And looking at the consensus boards, he was like in the 400s. And then over time, he slowly creeped up. But I was just kind of stunned why a prospect like him just like was falling under the radar. Not only because like he didn't go to a small school. I think even his teammate Bo, I can't remember his name now. He had like his teammate who had pretty poor metrics was getting more hype than him, which I just didn't
I
understand.
think that guy ended up like retiring because he had ankle issues. I can't remember his name.
He's also like a 6th or 7th year player.
Yeah.
So I was just not understanding it. And then the further I dove into his profile, I just continued to become really impressed. If you look at specifically drafted players, he led the entire class in both yards after catch and air yards. I think the only person right now shows him ranking second because that's inclusive of there's a 49ers undrafted rookie, Isaiah
Mayer from Nebraska.
Mayer. Yeah. He had a higher air yards per reception than Thornton. But if you look at specifically drafted players, he ranked first in air yards per reception and yards after catch, which I don't think has ever been done. A lot of people will attribute it to like the Tennessee offense, but even then, I don't think that's necessarily fair because I don't think Jalen Hyatt put up these kind of advanced metrics when he was going off, and then even all his teammates throughout the years with the current coaching staff at Tennessee was not putting up these metrics. So it was the same, not only just the air yards and yards at the catch, but the quarterback rating when targeted. He had really high yards per reception. If you look at both career, but then also if you break it down with man yards per reception and zone, he's the only player in the class that ranked top 5 at both. But obviously the thing that scares you away is the overall volume he got in college was pretty low. But yeah, no, I'm completely in on Thornton.
Yeah, he's like a fun enigma, like a thoroughbred Mustang that you just want to watch gallop for 80 yards 2 times a game. What are you going to give up to get a guy like him in Dynasty? Like, are you willing to actually put your money where your mouth is and trade away, maybe someone who's – I'm trying to think where he goes and, like, who would be a potential interesting offer. I would think Joe Mixon might be as, like that's wild to say, but, like, Joe Mixon's just now on IR, like, he's almost 28, 29. Like, that's probably close to what you would almost have to give up to get a guy like this who is getting so much steam right now. So, like, are you willing to make that sort of trade, or are you?
I am. As a rebuilder, it wouldn't be even a second thought. I would 100% trade away Mixon, who's approaching his 30s as a running back. But even as a contender, especially with the recent news with Mixon probably missing the first 4 games, potentially more than that. I do think Mixon, if he's comes back healthy, I think he's going to be productive with the Texans, especially looking at their current running back room, who I don't think I think Chubb has lost a step. Damian Pierce is kind of iffy as a running back, but I would, even as a contender, I think I would trade Mixon for Thornton because I do think Thornton Jr. has the potential to be a contributor not only this year, but I think the ceiling he has is definitely worth it when trading away like an older running back like Mixon.
Dude, I just pulled that one out of my butt, and I felt like it was kind of rich.
I'm not only a big Thornton fan. I think I have genuine thought out process as to why I think Thornton is worth that kind of value.
Yeah, no, I believe you, and I love that you you were willing to be bold with it, like, because I think that is bold, man. Like, if you asked like the average casual person, are they trading Joe Mixon away for Deontay Thornton Jr.? They'd probably say, "Who?" You know what I mean? And so, but that's why you're watching the Dynasty Deep Dive, because in 2 weeks people are going to know who, and we talked about him here. And so I love it. Thanks for talking through him with me. Another guy that I'm a big Broncos fan, in all honesty, and thought it was really interesting that you brought up a really interesting data point about Marvin Mims. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up and we can talk through it. So I think you mentioned something around that 95% of his receiving yards came after the catch, more than 20% ahead of second place.
Yeah.
That's the second highest that you've charted since 2014, with Rondale Moore, like the ultimate gadget guy ever, being the only guy to surpass him. Like, is Mims too gadgety, or do you think like some of the stuff coming out is he's playing every snap with the starters in the preseason? He could be in a more full-time wide receiver 2 role. Like, where are you at with Marvin Mims? Is he too gadgety, or do you trust him to be a productive wide receiver 2 this year?
Yeah, I think once you start describing a player, whether he's gadgeting or not, I think that's already kind of a red flag as far as it kind of his ceiling as a fantasy producer. We saw last year that he does have the potential to have these spike games, especially if like the coaching staff is willing to craft these game plans around him. But I think Rondale Moore, it makes sense that him and Marvin Mims are kind of in a tier in their own when looking at like yards after catch relative to their overall production, because I do see them very similar. They do have similar body types. Rondale Moore obviously is shorter but a little stockier than Mims, but I think even as prospects, they're pretty similar. Where I was a fan of Rondale Moore and like the potential he had as a catcher player, but he did have a cap ceiling, and obviously with the injuries, he's never really been able to kind of showcase his ability. But with Marvin Mims, it's very similar where most of his yardage obviously has come after the catch. I think he had like 2 big deep plays down the field this year, but I think that more so comes from the fact that he is kind of a gadgety player. The expectation for the defense is that he's probably going to get targets behind the line of scrimmage, and occasionally you're going to be able to take a deep shot with him. But if he does consistently start like making those plays and allows for the defense to kind of game plan against him, I don't think he has the ability to kind of beat like all kinds of defensive schemes or anything like that. So to kind of answer your question, I do think to a point he is maybe a little bit too casually. Yeah.
I think Marvin Mims is going to have a good year, man. I fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on me again. I'm willing to get shamed 3 times before I like. This is my final go around with him. He showed me some signs of life at the end of the year. I loved the deployment. I loved that they used him out of the backfield. I think what's interesting about this graphic that you put together here is the discrepancy from ADOT in 2023 to 2024. It was so high in 2023. He is an explosive player, and when he came out of Oklahoma in college, like, he wasn't a gadget guy. He was a downfield flanker. And so, like, for me, I see a guy who can do the yak and the Debo stuff, and I see a guy who can wing some down the field. So, like, I like the player. I like the offense. And I like the wide receiver room. I think he could be one of the better players in that room. So I will respectfully push back a little bit and say that I like my boy Marvin Mims in 2025. The Bronco bias is probably coming out. But, yeah, I don't want him to be too gadgety. I want him to use him like a real guy. And I guess that remains to be seen. But I'm willing to take a shot on him in the middle rounds.
No, that makes sense. And I think part of it where it stems from is that I'm actually pretty big into Trey Franklin, the other wide receiver.
Okay, yeah.
I'm really high on him as a prospect. I think with my predictive model, he actually ranked as a top 5 wide receiver prospect.
Wow.
Even ahead of someone like Brian Thomas Jr., which looking back, obviously does not look like a good take. But if you dive into Trey Franklin's numbers, pretty much across the board, he has the kind of metrics that align with some of the best wide receivers across the league. He played in a good conference, a good competition. He had insane yards per route run and other advanced metrics. He had really good quarterback rating when targeted. And I think one of the most important things is that he was super young coming out. He was only 21. So going into this year, he's going to be 22. And if I were to guess which wide receiver from the room outside of Sutton does take the next step, I would probably put my money on Franklin and then even Pat Bryant, who I also like as a prospect, ahead of Marvin Mims, because I do think the coaching staff has kind of told you what they think of Mims, despite like running with the ones, just to kind of plays a job for him. It feels like they lack confidence in him as like a true wide receiver.
Yeah, and like Pat Bryant's getting the Michael Thomas comparisons, right? So there's uncertainty there, right? And that breeds opportunity. Like for me, I play best ball and I mix all four of them in, right? Because like Franklin has been the best click because you can get him at the very, very end after Bryant, and it seems like he's going to be going ahead of Pat Bryant in the depth chart, at least early on in the year. And it's a guy who has a connection with Bo Nix and showed development in the preseason. So you heard it here on the Dynasty Deep Dive. We like our Broncos wide receivers. We are going to go through one of my favorite takeaways from your thread about interesting stats that people probably don't know. And so do not go anywhere, guys, because you're going to want to see this when we get back.
The world famous Draft Kit is live, and it is this signature bit of content that we create every year to help you dominate your fantasy league. The most in-depth team previews you'll find anywhere, including signature trends and a lot of key stats on individual teams. Also, a 300-player cheat sheet for best ball, for seasonal leagues, individual cheat sheets from the top analysts here at Player Profiler. There's also video analysis and written analysis from some of the top minds in the industry. And we have all these new features like a Rate My Team feature, plug in your roster, and our AI tools automatically generate a draft score, as well as a whole commissioner guide. You have to subscribe to it to believe it. PlayerProfiler.com/draftkit, PlayerProfiler.com/draftkit. Get it now. Go win.
Yes, sir. Check out the Player Profiler Guide Draft Kit. I actually did the write-ups for most of the Broncos players. I talk about my thoughts about Marvin Mims there a little bit as well. So check out our Player Profiler Draft Kit, and good luck in your fantasy drafts in the coming weeks, guys. So I promised the viewers a show, and we're not going to disappoint. One of my favorite things that you came up with, I'm going to throw it on the screen here, was this kind of bold finding about DK Metcalf. So over the past 2 years, he's led the NFL with 72 contested targets, number one in contested targets, but 16th in contested catches over that span with 24, just a 33% contested catch rate. Thought this was so interesting because like there's been film coming out of training camp, and I know you don't watch the film, but there has been film of this guy missing contested catches and Rodgers and him kind of like struggling to find that connection in the end zone. And I think contested catches, like if that's like where Rodgers likes to live with his wide receivers is, near the end zone, throwing up jump balls, good chemistry there and good jump ball ability by the wide receiver. So do you think that he can find success with Rodgers in Pittsburgh, or are you avoiding him in fantasy football?
Yeah, no, Metcalf, I've always thought that Metcalf was an interesting pairing with Rodgers when they traded for him and then the Steelers signed him, because Rodgers is the kind of quarterback where he does put a lot of emphasis into the wide receivers that he trusts. Like on a surface level, you would think Metcalf is the kind of player where he has one of the most athletic builds in the entire NFL, that you see all these highlight catches by him that you would think the data would back it up as far as like him be able to come down with those contested catches. But over the last 2 years, he has consistently not been able to bring those in, which does make me a bit wary in terms of like him not actually like converting those contested targets to catches, but also the pairing with Rodgers. I still think there's potential there because if you look at the rest of the Pittsburgh's wide receiver room, there's really no competition there.
Yeah,
Metcalf is one of the players where like I'm confident he's going to lead the team in targets, and there's like really not even a second option to compete with him. But I think it may be comparable to like what we've seen with Garrett Wilson over the last couple of years, where he's getting the targets, but he's not able to put those to consistent fantasy production.
Yeah, and I just like again, I thought that was such a useful takeaway. It's funny. One of the comments is like, "That is very interesting. Thanks for sharing." Right on your page, like so. I just love because to your point, it's so easy to get excited about him being a perfect fit for Aaron Rodgers with his size and build, but then you dig into the analytics and you're like, wait, this could actually look kind of ugly. like it could look like Aaron Rodgers throwing jump balls up to him not coming down with them. You can picture Rodgers going like this with his hands, like you should have went here and I threw it here.
Yeah.
And you're just like, man, is that what I want to deal with in my fantasy league? Or like, do I want to win? Right. So for me, it was kind of an eye opener where I'm like, there's a lot of good players you can target in that DK Metcalf range of drafts. So don't go all in on him just because you think he's going to get the usage, because he does not thrive in those contested catch situations. So I'm going to bring out one more interesting stat on a guy that I really like, and it was pretty interesting to me that I believe I'm going to throw up the stat here. It's around Jerry Jeudy, and again, I like Jerry Jeudy. I think he's a great player, but you kind of call out here that since 20, I want to say, dating back to 2014, the 714 routes last year, that is the most charted since going back to 2014. So it's like, the production was there, but 90 receptions on 714 routes isn't necessarily something to like write home about in terms of, target earning abilities. So talk to me. Like, people will tell you in Dynasty, this guy's underpriced. He's like the wide receiver 30 or like 40 or something like that in Dynasty. And people are like, well, he's coming off the wide receiver 12 year. And I think this kind of data is what people think of when they aren't ranking him higher. There's a gut feeling that like, oh, that guy was more of a like success through millions of routes run as opposed to, tons of production. So like, is that kind of how you read this? Are you sort of out on Jeudy, or do you like the talent and think like, hey, it takes skill to be on the field to run that many routes?
No, Jeudy is like another player where I understand where he ranks in terms of value, both redraft and Dynasty. So I'm not necessarily out on him at his current value because he's still in the same system. And I think one of the things that is maybe like a misconception with the Browns is they've had bad quarterback play for the last few years, but with Stefanski, they have a lot of volume. Not just last year with Winston, but then the year before with Flacco, where they're willing to throw the ball a lot, and so that's kind of why, at least in the short term, I'm kind of in on Jeudy with the current value. But I think what this does indicate is that like he really isn't the kind of wide receiver that does demand like a high target rate. You can see here that he has a sub 20% target rate, 19.9%, and usually what we want to see is like a target rate of definitely above 20%, but closer to like 25%, where when they're running routes, they're getting targeted at least a quarter of the time. And Jeudy isn't showing that. His production is like per route production and efficiency isn't all that different than what we've seen in the years past. The only difference is that he ran obviously a lot of routes charted back to 2014. But in the short term, I do think he still has a potential to put up numbers, but he does seem like a clear candidate where you look back and historically you see his production over the years, and his 1 year stands out as like the wide receiver 12, but then it's like mixed in with like typically wide receiver 30, 40 in that range.
Yeah, he's. I've always liked Jeudy. Like I'm a Broncos fan, and I remember jumping up and down when we drafted him, just like watching the tape from Alabama, and just how leggy he is. There's just something fun about the style of play he came out into the NFL with, and he wasn't what he lived up to. Like people were really touting this guy. I think we took him over CeeDee Lamb, right, for example. So, and the per route basis isn't eye-popping, but I think to your point, like what's changed? Like he has little to no target competition. This is going to be easily one of the worst teams in the NFL. And so like I'm in on Jeudy for this year. I'm in on Jeudy at cost in Dynasty. Again, I do think it takes something to be talented enough to run more routes than anybody in the past 10 years. And at least he put up over 1,200 yards doing it, right? It could have been a lot uglier. Like if he was doing some Wan'Dale Robinson type stuff with those 700 routes and 200 catches.
So I know.
Yards. Well, thanks for joining the show, Andres. Is there anything else like super bold claims, predictions that you need the viewers to know about before we cut loose?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that I'm extremely bold on someone like Dante Thornton. I think he really does have the potential to be like a top 5 receiver from this year's draft class. I was higher on him than someone like Jack Besh, who was drafted in the second round, but we already kind of know where I stand there. I think a couple other things is like I think it's relative to Jeudy. Not only I think there's a wide receiver in his range that I'm probably higher on, and I think has a real chance to go to the next level is someone like Khalil Shakir, who I actually traded Jeudy for Shakir straight up in a Dynasty league. I'm extremely in on Shakir. Not only as a prospect, I think he kind of went under the radar. He was drafted in the 5th round by the Bills. But I think I definitively believe that he is the best receiver on the Bills. I don't think Coleman is really competition to take targets away from him. I can see him having a really like a big year, similar to what we saw from Jeudy, where he put up 1,200 yards. Really in on Shakir. But another player I'm in on is Judy's teammate Harold Fannin Jr., who is someone else who had absurd advanced metrics. He's the type of player where he puts up like a big rookie year, or like in a couple years' time, you look back and it just kind of makes sense. He led not only amongst tight ends, but he led all of college football in receptions and yards this year. I think he had like an absurd yards per route run relative to other tight ends. I think he's someone that I wouldn't be surprised if he beat out Njoku for receptions and targets this year, and could potentially finish as like the number 2 target on the Browns.
I mean, the Shakir take is like medium spice, right? Like I think a lot of people know he's good. I think he's a better like real NFL player maybe than like a fantasy player. That's just kind of my sentiment on Shakir. But Fannin, like that's spicy. He could be, and I think to your point, it doesn't mean that he's necessarily taking Njoku off the field. Like what if they just cut Deontay Johnson? It's Jerry, Cedric Tillman, and who else? Like Njoku and Fannin could be a big part of their passing game, and they could both be on the field at the same time with Fannin more in a slot role and Njoku kind of more in an inline role. And so it's one of those things where it's like you don't want to picture it because it's kind of gross in your head, like a 2 tight end offense. But then like you
see, fun to watch. He is fun. He does not look like a typical tight end. A lot of people will say he's undersized, but he is literally the same exact size as Brock Bowers. Like down to like height, weight. I think Bowers has slightly longer arms, but like Bowers isn't out there because of his blocking ability.
Right.
He's an elite receiving threat. I think Fannin could find similar kind of success to what we've seen with Bowers. Not to that level, but like the same style.
Yeah, a receiving threat at tight end who's going to produce for you in fantasy. So I love it. I love the call. Talk to me, close us out. Where can the people find your work? Any work of yours that you want to make sure they're aware of?
Yeah, I post most of my work on X. I still call it Twitter, so it still feels weird to call it X. But you can find me at @nofilm_analysis there. I'm also on Blue Sky. It's the same handle. I think it's no film but dash analysis. That's where I post most of my work. And then I have a Patreon for those who are interested in that. You can find me under I Don't Watch Film at Patreon. I do post some exclusive content, including some draft guides I put together for wide receiver, running backs, tight ends, and I also have a Dynasty rookie draft guide, along with you were showing those the NFL advanced analytic profiles. There are 65 of those. So I have a draft guide for those where you can find 65 wide receiver profiles.
Wild. You're an absolute unit in this industry, bro.
Appreciate it. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining the show, guys. If you liked it, give it a like, thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, give a comment, and then subscribe to the show so we can keep good content like this coming to you guys. And thanks for watching. Good luck in your fantasy drafts, everybody.